for the Baylor Undergraduate Research in Science and Technology. And we're an organization that strives to not only educate our members about research, how to get research opportunities and research techniques, but we also want to empower our members to be competitive applicants for any program they may apply to. So first, in conjunction with the Pre-Health Office of Pre-Health Studies, put together a series of events for you guys just to familiarize yourself with all the different programs that we have at Baylor. And so obviously we're at the first one, but up here you see all the other ones that we have coming up this month. And so all the applications are due on January 31st. And so the VA Center of Excellence Research Program is a program really geared towards neuroscience and psychology. And so we have two very important people today here to talk to you about this program. So we have Dr. Dolan and Dr. DeVere. After receiving a bachelor's in science in psychology from Indiana University, Dr. Dolan went on to earn both an MA and a PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Iowa. She completed her clinical internship at Yale University and went on to become a postdoctorate fellow funded by the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. Before coming to Baylor in 2007, Dr. Dolan was a faculty member at the Brown University Center for Alcohol and Addiction Studies and served as a research scientist at the Providence VA Medical Center. Her current research focuses on how cognitive functioning impacts real-world functioning in psychiatric populations. Dr. DeVere is a clinical research psychologist at the VISN 17 Center of Excellence for Research on Returning War Veterans and is an assistant professor of psychiatry at the Texas A&M Health Science Center. She completed her graduate training at the University of Maryland, College Park, and after receiving her undergraduate degree from NYU, now she's working at the Center of Excellence. And so her current research interest is in the association between interpersonal behavior and suicide risk in veteran populations, and she also conducts longitudinal research on suicide, PTSD, depression, and traumatic brain injury in returning war veterans. So without further ado, I'd like you guys to help me welcome Dr. DeVere.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really, really great to be here. Well, my presentation isn't as spiffy as the first presentation. That was really great. So bodes very well for having you all in our program if you can create presentations like that. Come on over to the VA. I'd love to have you. Anyway, I'm Dr. DeVere, and I'm currently the interim director of undergraduate training at the VA Business 17 Center of Excellence for Research on Returning War Veterans. And I'm here tonight to talk to you about the Center of Excellence Research Program. As was mentioned, I'm a clinical research psychologist. I'm also an assistant professor at Texas A&M Health Science Center. So what is the Center of Excellence? So it's a center dedicated to studying mental health and traumatic brain injury and returning war veterans. Our mission is to promote research on the following topics. Patterns and course of post-deployment adjustment. So how are veterans, when they return, how are they adjusting? What does that look like? Developing models predicting risk, resilience, recovery, and relapse to the sequelae of conflict in war theaters. So what makes someone more likely to have PTSD? What protects someone against developing PTSD after they've served in combat? Adaptation and evaluation of existing and underdeveloped treatments for veterans and their families. So we also not only focus on assessing mental health problems and traumatic brain injury in this population, but we also look at testing existing treatments and developing new treatments to treat things like post-traumatic stress disorder, substance use disorders, depression, things like that. Another part of our mission is to disseminate and educate and take the results of the research that we do and tell other people about it. And that's actually, I'm serving in that capacity of our mission tonight by coming to you here to you all and discussing our research and also recruiting you to participate in our educational programs. So the COE has, that was our mission, but here are our specific goals. Conduct useful state-of-the-art research on the assessment and treatment of co-occurring mental health problems and returning war veterans and their families. Develop best practices for these veterans and their families. So, there are a lot of different treatments out there. So what are the best practices? When a veteran comes to the VA and they say that they're, having difficulties and we give them a diagnosis, how should we treat them? Disseminate the results of the research to build a standard of evidence-based practice for complex patients. You all are here at Baylor, and this is a university that focuses on research. And what we do at our center is conducting research that develops an evidence base. You hear a lot about evidence-based medicine. That's what we're doing. We're developing an evidence base for how to understand these disorders and how to treat them. Provide training to current and future generations of mental health providers. So that's you all, and that's where you fit into our goals. And disseminate the results nationally and internationally to educate both researchers and administrators to ensure that VA has a future generation of researchers to carry the torch forward. So how's the COE structured? We have 5 what we call cores. So there's the treatment core, the assessment core, the neuroimaging core, the biomarkers and genetics core, and the education and dissemination core. The treatment core focuses on conducting treatment outcome research. Right now, we have a study that looks at an acceptance-based behavioral treatment for comorbid post-traumatic stress disorder and substance use disorders. So, that's using acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a therapy that was developed by Steve Hayes. And there is a lot of research out there saying that this is a great treatment, but it hasn't been tested with individuals with post-traumatic stress disorder and substance use disorders. So we have a treatment study that's ongoing that looks at that. And I, myself, am within the treatment core, but I also do work in the assessment core as well. Within the assessment core, my research focuses on testing the theory that social cognition is associated with suicidal ideation and behavior. I'll get to that towards the end of the presentation and get into some more specifics. We also look at identifying factors of the development of post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, substance use disorder, including individual difference variables, environmental factors, and also genetic contributions. And that lines up also with the biomarkers and genetics cores. So a lot of the cores kind of overlap with each other as well. We also look at early identification of stress disorders, traumatic brain injury, and other neuropsychiatric conditions. The neuroimaging core, we have a functional MRI, and we are testing a new MRI sequence to determine the pathology related to neurotrauma and mild to moderate traumatic brain injury. In the biomarkers and genetics core, we're looking at the biological basis of PTSD and depression, so we have genetic studies going on. And in the education and dissemination core, that core coordinates trainee experiences, so undergraduate interns, like you all would be if you came to our center, postdoctoral fellows, doctoral interns, and the education dissemination core also uses an evidence base to disseminate research findings from our center. So where are we? Are we close? Yes, we're very close to you. So we're located at the Waco VA campus. There's a picture. It's actually a really beautiful campus. I was really surprised when I first went. It looks kind of like a college campus to me. And it's a very large campus. And it's about a 15-minute drive away. It's located off of Highway 6. So if you just go down 35 and get onto 6, it's the first exit. So what training do our interns receive at the COE? Well, primarily research training. We are a research center. We focus on research. that's the kind of training that you'll get when you are an intern with us. So to be more specific about that, SERP interns help coordinate our research studies. So we have all these research studies. They take a tremendous amount of time and effort and work, and so you all help us get them done. So you do things like recruitment and retention, helping us recruit participants into our studies, helping us retain them once they're in our studies, conducting telephone screens, so talking with veterans over the phone, seeing if they're appropriate for our studies. We have different eligibility criteria, like you can only be within a certain age range, things like that. So you talk with them and see if they're appropriate for our studies. At times you conduct telephone interviews where you'll speak with the veteran over the phone and ask them different questions on questionnaires. You also help out with organization of study materials. Other duties include data entry and management, data coding, data transcription, data analysis, and grant coordination and submission. So I do a lot of data coding in my work, so I'll get into that. I guess I'll get into that in a little bit, but basically I look at interpersonal behavior very specifically within videos. So you watch a video and then you code that video for different interpersonal behaviors, and I'm looking to see if that's related to suicide or not. So that's part of the data coding. I also do different speech tasks within my data, so we have the participants engage in a speech task, and then you all transcribe that speech task, and we look to see if different patterns in speech are related to suicidal ideation and behavior. So what do you learn? So overall, I think at the broadest sense, what you learn is how do we develop this evidence base? What is this basis for evidence-based medicine? Where does it come from? It comes from us conducting this research. And so when you come to our program, you really get immersed in that. What does this look like on a day-to-day basis when I'm here doing this work? What's it like? You also learn about research administration because, I'm sure a lot of you have read articles, journal articles in your courses, but it's not just kind of typing up a little paper. There's just so much more to it. It's creating hypotheses, figuring out how to get grant funding. Once you do get grant funding, how do you implement that study, getting it through the IRB process, the Institutional Review Board process. Once you've gotten it all that way, how can you recruit participants into your study? This is for human subject research at least. How do you keep those people in your study? How do you collect the data properly? How do you enter the data? How do you make sure the data has integrity? How do you analyze the data? And then once you get those results, how do you prepare them for publication? So there's so much behind that journal article that you read. And so when you come and do an internship with us, you learn about how to do all of that. Other things that you learn about is about psychopathology. We focus a lot on post-traumatic stress disorder, specifically in veterans. So you're looking at a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder related to combat exposure. So specifically related to events that they experienced typically while they were in Iraq or Afghanistan. Also a lot of depression, substance use disorders. I also study schizophrenia, and I study suicide as well. And that's a tremendous problem within the veteran population. The last statistic out was 22 veterans per day die by suicide. So it's an epidemic. It's a very, very serious public health problem. And so, it's something that I think is really, really important to study. And so I really feel that our mission is just very, very critical. Because, these individuals went and they served our country, and they've only come back to not be able to survive as a civilian. And so we really, really have to get a very good and deep understanding of this problem so that we can prevent it. You also learn about traumatic brain injury. So we have a longitudinal study of 309 veterans, and I think 67% have had at least a mild traumatic brain injury within their lifetime. And this is another condition that's very, very poorly understood. So we're just starting to get a handle on this. Dr. Dolan and I are actually collaborating on some research right now, looking at the association between traumatic brain injury and suicide, and what mediates that relationship. So we found that if you have a traumatic brain injury, you're more likely to have problems with executive functioning. You're more likely to have problems thinking, planning, things of that nature. And that makes you at higher risk for suicidal ideation. So we're actually in the process of writing that paper up right now. So that kind of gives you a flavor of what we do. So you'll also learn about treatment. Primarily, most of us at the center do cognitive behavioral therapy, which has a very strong evidence base. And then we also right now we're looking at acceptance and commitment therapy, but we're in the process of developing a lot of things. So right now I'm working on a lot of suicide prevention things. So I'm working on a couples therapy for suicide prevention. So we know that social support is a very, very strong risk factor for suicide. So if we bring in a partner, could that prevent suicide? Another thing we do is if somebody is saying that they're suicidal within the VA, we do this thing that's called a safety plan. So it starts at the lowest level. So it might be, okay, you're experiencing some suicidal ideation. How can you respond to that internally? Can you try to change your thoughts? Do some cognitive behavioral techniques, and then it goes up in escalation until they call the Veterans Crisis Line, or they call the hospital, or they call their doctor. Well, the thing is that when somebody's suicidal, they're really not thinking straight. And so we give them a nice little plan, but are they going to be able to cognitively go through all these steps? Probably not. Well, what if their significant other knew about the plan? This is particularly important within this area because in this area, there are a lot of gun owners. And we know that if somebody attempts suicide with a firearm versus overdosing on pills, they're far more likely to complete suicide with a firearm. So if we can get their significant other involved, they can help with also managing things like gun locks and things like that, so that they're able to be more likely to prevent their partner from engaging in suicidal behavior. So we're working on a lot of different things right now. You'll also learn about, so once we've done all this research, what do we do with it? Well, one of the things we do is we do presentations at conferences. We do presentations at local, national, and international conferences, which undergraduates are involved in. We also publish our research, and then we also take the research that we've done and we apply for more grant funding in order to kind of keep pushing that research forward. So what opportunities are there at the COE for interns? So as I mentioned, poster presentations. So right now our current cohort is putting together a poster presentation based off of our research. That's going to be presented at the Baylor Research Day. Is it the correct time for the Research Day, or is it a URSA? Yes, URSA. There are also opportunities for undergraduates to present at national conferences if you're really motivated. When you're in the program, we also do a didactic piece where we bring in speakers. So we have different speakers within the Center of Excellence. So they do different presentations on their research. So you get to learn about neuroimaging, or traumatic brain injury, or longitudinal research. And so we have that every week. Some weeks we have presenters, and some weeks we kind of work on a poster together, things like that. Something that's new that we're doing this year is we're doing a case conceptualization. That's something that you typically don't do until you're in graduate school. But what we're doing is we're having our current cohort either listen to or in person watch a clinical interview with one of our participants. And then they see the assessment, and then they conceptualize the problems that client has. Do they have post-traumatic stress disorder? Do they have depression? Things like that. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a taste of what you actually do when you're a clinician. Another opportunity that I see personally as a big opportunity is we have a lot of mentorship, and I personally try to provide a lot of mentorship. In particular, in relation to developing your curriculum vitae and your resume, which you will either need for graduate school or a job, unless you're independently wealthy, which is always a possibility. So that's something that's huge. You can get your degree, but if you don't understand how to build a CV or a resume, it's going to be really tough to get a job. I also provide a lot of mentorship on applying for graduate school. I will say with the caveat, I did a PhD in clinical psychology, so my advice is best geared towards that. But I also try to leverage my own connections. So if you say, I'm really interested in this, and I say, I don't really know anything about that. Like this year we had somebody say they're really interested in marriage and family therapy, that kind of master's degree. And I said, I don't really know anything about that, but I have a colleague that I went to graduate school with, and she got her degree, and now she's practicing, and I connected them so that my colleague could provide for mentorship. So I not only believe in providing mentorship myself where I can, but also reaching out to my network to see if they can help you. And that's really, really important, because that's how you get jobs, that's how you get connections, that's how you get into graduate school. Publications are possible for highly motivated interns who complete their internship successfully. So what do the CERP interns do after they leave? Where do they go? What are they up to? A lot of them go into PhDs or PsyDs in clinical psychology or master's programs in clinical psychology. A lot of people go into medical school. A lot of people do research assistant positions, and a lot of people do clinical positions. So it's pretty varied. And I mean, after, this year, I had someone from 2 years ago say, okay, I'm ready, I'm applying for graduate school. I'm doing it. And so I helped her with like all of her essays and her CV and her letters. And so to me, mentorship is something that goes beyond the program. For people who complete it successfully and are invested in the program, I really invest in you. It's kind of a relationship that goes beyond. Interns have gone on, and our program's only been going on for a few years, but of the people I could track, we had people go to Baylor, Columbia, University of Arizona, Kansas State University, University of Houston, University of Denver, Eastern Illinois University, and the Chinese University of Hong Kong. So we've had quite a bit of success in helping people reach their goals.
In the Department of Psychology and Neuroscience. I've been here since 2007. I've been actually collaborating with the Center of Excellence since it began on the very first day in August of 2007, which is kind of a funny historical story. My primary interest at the VA has been as a neuropsychologist. So part of my training, my primary training has been in addiction, substance use disorders, and my secondary kind of specialized training is in neuropsychology, which is looking at brain-behavior relationships. So I do research on memory, attentional abilities, executive function like Dr. DeBeer talked about, which is problem solving and decision making and planning into the future and organizing stuff so that you can succeed. And I have been doing that research with substance use patients, substance abuse patients. And when I got here to Waco and connected with the Center of Excellence, sort of came to this great realization that Central Texas is an ideal place to help veterans. We have lots of veterans around here. Fort Hood is in Killeen. Fort Hood is the largest military installation in the US or world, or both? World. So the most people who are in the Army live at Fort Hood. A lot of people, when they retire from the military, sort of stay where they were stationed. So we have a lot of people who are retired from the military who are veterans who live in Central Texas. Lots of folks who have had substance use problems, have had post-traumatic stress disorder, have had traumatic brain injury, who need our help. And we've got this amazing resource in the Center of Excellence to do that. So I've been collaborating with them and doing some research on the relationships between post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury, and looking at how neuropsychological functioning impacts those two things. But my role here in this program is essentially to be the Baylor liaison. So if you apply for the CERT program and are accepted, you'd be working primarily with the researchers at the Center of Excellence. So you'd be at the VA for 10 plus hours a week doing your research. What you would do with me is sign up for one of my psychology or neuroscience classes. It would be a 4B96, which is just an advanced hours elective course. It would count as elective advanced hours. And in collaboration with the VA and with the pre-health office, we've developed a syllabus, we've developed contracts, we've developed grading criteria, and my role is really to make sure that you get course credit for this opportunity. So the VA would be primarily interviewing and selecting people and then doing the primary training, but I would help if there were problems that came up, and I make sure that you get your grades for the course. So that's my presentation. Questions?
In the requirements, it talks about a research methods and a statistics 2400 class. I've never seen those before.
Are you a psych major?
I'm a neuroscience major.
Okay, so that would be something different. You don't have to actually take those classes as a neuroscience major, so we can talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a different curriculum for psych and neuroscience.
So we would need those two courses up directly for the...
Don't worry about it. We can talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah. Crickets, I'm hearing cricket. Questions for Dr. DeBeer about her research or the specific opportunities?
That's a good question. So it varies every year, and it's dependent upon how many investigators we have who need students to help out. And we haven't actually talked about it for this year. I would imagine 6. We've had years where we've gone up to 12. Yeah.
With the 5 different cores, which one would the students be primarily working on?
Oh, that's a great question. So when students come in, we try to match them with their interests. So like if you're a neuroscience major, we would try to match you in the neuroimaging core. But it's always possible that the neuroimaging core would be like, well, we don't really have a lot going on right now. We're not taking anybody. So we try the best we can to match those interests where we can, but sometimes it's not possible. It's just dependent upon who needs what at the time. And that's something that we would probably talk about further in within the interview process, because around the interview process we'll have a better idea of who's requesting students for next year. Certainly we always have people working in the assessment core, always. And they primarily work on our longitudinal study project SERVE, which I talked a little bit about, but that's a study that we've had going on for, I think, 6 or 7 years now. It's in its 3rd wave, and the last wave we followed 309 veterans for a year. Now we're picking them up 3 years after we last saw them. We're following them for another 2 years. There's another pre-phase of that study which was following 100 of them for a year before that. So we have a lot of data on these individuals. So we do time points in between the times we see them. We mail them questionnaires. They mail them back. It's just a massive, massive data set. So it has neuropsychological functioning. It has mental health disorders. It has conditions of their deployment. It has their military history. Coping. It has so many things. So
If you name it as a psychological construct.
it's pretty much in that data set. It's a pretty amazing data set.
Their baseline interview is
6 to 8 hours long. Yeah. And genetic sample.
So which, do you work with all veterans or specific branch?
That's a good question. So within my study, I work with all veterans because the study that I presented on was PTSD, but I also have the same study in schizophrenia. And our schizophrenia population tends to be older, and so I didn't want to limit them to OEF, OIF because that would limit my recruitment potential, and I don't really have a reason to limit it to OEF, OIF. Within SERVE, does everybody know what that is? Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom. So OEF, OIF is the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In SERV, we limited to that population because we particularly want to study this population. We really want to understand what's going on with returning veterans. So we do limit it in that instance. So it kind of depends on the study.
Did you only study combatants or combatants and
So
non-combatants?
I don't in my study. I take all comers, but in
Okay.
SERV we only study people who went to Iraq and Afghanistan.
But they didn't have to see combat.
They didn't have to
could've
see
been in
combat.
support
Yep, they could have
roles.
been in a support role. Yep, they could have been in a support role. So we do have a couple people who are pretty low on their combat scores, but it just kind of depends on the study and what the goals of the study are. So the goal of SERV is to understand returning veterans. The goal of my study is to understand social cognition as a novel predictor of suicide.
These are great questions.
Yeah, these are great questions. Anyone else?
Is there a training period before you actually start on?
Yeah, so typically, it's a great introduction to the VA because if you know anything about the VA, you know there's a lot of paperwork involved. So we have you come in before you leave in the spring semester, before you start, and you fill out paperwork because we have to get you appointments to the VA, which is a very, very, very difficult process and a very, very, very time-consuming process for our staff. So we have one person and her entire job is to do this kind of stuff, is to get people credentialed so that they can work with us. It's that time-consuming because we have to make sure that you are who you say you are and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's a lot of forms to fill out. And so when you come in, we give you those forms, and then we also kind of discuss, you know, what you're going to be doing in the internship and what it's about. And then we also typically have kind of an orientation when you get there. So you'll have to get your keys, you'll have to get your badge, you'll have to, do a lot of administrative things to just kind of get up and running and get computer access. And they don't just kind of let someone walk on and, you know, just start doing things. There's a lot of steps involved.
Y'all actually will have more VA access than I do.
Yeah. Don't worry about data security at the VA. It's very difficult to even get on a computer.
And that's a great question. It's a year-long program. So we
Yeah.
ask people to commit from August
Yes.
through May. And part of the reason is because the training is so intensive that it's really a shame if somebody is trained for a semester
Yeah.
and then leaves. That's a horrible use of resources for the VA and really for the interns too.
Right. You know, exactly. There's two competing things here on our end. It takes so much work for us to get you even in the door that when someone leaves after a couple months, it's really hard on us. And we also give you training in SPSS, literature searches. We do give you a lot of research training. So it's hard to lose somebody after a really short period of time. So we do really ask that you're absolutely sure that you can make this kind of a commitment. The other end of it is that, you know, in this area, there aren't a lot of research internships. So if you take up a spot and then, you know, the second week you decide this isn't for you, you take in someone else's spot. And so, you know, it's kind of, to be fair to the other students, you really have to be very sure that this is what you want to do and that you're absolutely sure that you can commit to a full year.
Yeah, in terms of the commitment, you said it's about 10 hours a week.
Mhm.
Would that be like 3 days or weekends?
So we're only there 8 to 4:30 during the week. And so typically it's 8 hours in the office, anytime between 8 to 4:30. I typically ask that you do at least 2-hour blocks at a minimum because once you get there and you get your stuff going, it literally takes 15 minutes to log onto the computer sometimes. So if you're only there for an hour, you're like, I just logged on the computer, I checked my email, and I'm gonna go. So I usually ask that you do a longer period of time. And then you have an hour-long didactic, so that's where everybody meets as a group. We typically have that Tuesdays at 3:30. And that's where we have the speakers, or we talk about how to do a CV, or we talk about how to do a poster presentation, things like that. And then you have an hour of like homework. So, and we really try to keep that to an hour. We're kind of doing something new right now, and we're kind of trying to see how it goes, but we really just try to, you're there a lot already, don't want to make it even heavier on you all, but at the same time, in order to get the most out of the program, it's best that you have those experiences, because another goal of our program is to make you good consumers of research. So it's not not all of you are going to go out and be researchers, right? No, it's not going to happen. But all of you are going to go out into a world in which you consume research every day. And so it's not just knowing how to do the research, but how to understand what is good research, because there's a lot of bad research out there. And you may end up in a career where you really need to understand what is good research and be able to make those decisions within your job. I mean, another thing too that I always, so I used to teach when I was in graduate school, that I would always say to my students is, you never know when a family member is going to be ill. And you may need to understand very deeply a research area that you've never understood before. So if you have a basis of knowing what good research looks like, you'll be able to help in those kinds of situations. So it really is an important thing. I mean, you read the news all the time, this research study says this, or this research study says that. Well, I used to do this exercise with my students, when you actually go and look at one of those research studies, is it really a sound research study? Did they really do the research correctly in a way that was right? When you understand research, you can make that distinction very easily.
This is the only one at the Waco VA, at the Center of Excellence for Research on Returning War Veterans, but there are 4 others?
Yes, we have, I'm Erin Steele, Office of Pre-Health Studies. You probably all got my email today. So we have 5 different clinical research programs. How many of you are pre-health? Okay, so some of you are not pre-health. But if you are pre-health, you're eligible for any of those 5. So we'll have partners from all of our programs here this week and next week. So you can come just like we are today and meet all of our partners for that. If you're not pre-health, I mean, that's why this is just a diamond in the rough. I mean, there are not very many opportunities like this, as Dr. DeVere said. So if you have the opportunity to commit for an entire year, I mean, that will pop out on any resume. That's an incredible experience that will certainly differentiate you for any master's or graduate school, because there are not many programs like this that are out there. So that's what makes this such a quality experience if you're interested. I mean, it is a time commitment, but it's one that will be so rewarding long term. Especially the fact that you get to see every bit of the research process. For a lot of our summer programs, you might just see one little tiny part. Some of our research programs, you're just doing a little independent research project that will never be published. It's just something that's benefiting that certain area of the hospital. But this, you're really getting an opportunity to have national recognition, not just your Baylor thesis. It's not just something that you're contributing here to Hillcrest, but it's national research. So it's a phenomenal opportunity, and they do go really far to get to know you and also get to know your interests and help you professionally. Dr. DeVere's given me many examples of students that she's helped to connect beyond even their time here at Baylor. So, but you can, for this program and for all of our other pre-health programs, you apply on our website. So if you just go to the research section of the pre-health website, you'll see all of our different programs, and you can apply right there on the site. And there's also a lot more information about the VA and all the programs on there, and the applications are due January 31st. And you can always email me or Dr. DeVere with any questions you have. Any questions on that? Okay.
We do require a letter of recommendation if you're kind of just learning about the program now and you think you can submit the application, but your letter might be late. That's okay. You can tell me if it's just like a few days late to send me. Yeah.
How many letters?
Just one.
Okay.
From like a faculty member. Yep.
Previous faculty member?
Yep. Yep.
All right, let's give Dr. DeVere and Dr. Dolan one more round. so much for coming. As Ms. DeMille said, applications are due January 31st, so get those in. And our next event is actually tomorrow at 5:30 in the Alexander classroom, and it's a SWRP showcase. So there's a student panel, and they talk about the SWRP program.